My family called and asked if I could help cover my brother's legal fees. I asked what was happening. They told me he was suing me. I paused, expecting a joke, but none came. I ended the call. 3 days later, my brother's lawyer reached out to me directly. My name's Adam. I'm 34. If you had told me a year ago that my own brother would try to sue me while also asking me to pay for the lawyer handling the case, I would have laughed. I probably would have offered you a glass of water, asked if you were okay, and then laughed again just to be sure you understood how ridiculous it sounded. But this is where things stand. Life has a way of turning you into the subject of a joke you didn't even know existed. Let me step back and explain the full situation, because this story needs context. I grew up in a small town outside Knoxville, Tennessee. My parents, Gail and Herschel, believed family was everything. And by everything, I mean they treated it as a reason to avoid setting boundaries, avoid saying no, and avoid holding anyone accountable as long as they shared the same last name. My older brother, Sutton, is 2 years older than me. Growing up, he was the golden child. He was the quarterback, the homecoming king, the person who could walk into a room and instantly get attention from everyone. I was the quieter one. I liked reading, building things in the garage, and keeping to myself while maintaining decent grades that went mostly unnoticed. I won't pretend my childhood was difficult. It wasn't. My parents cared for me, provided for me, and showed up enough to be considered present. But there was always an unspoken understanding that Sutton was the main focus and I was secondary. When Sutton played a game, the whole family would travel hours to watch. When I won a regional science fair, my mom simply said, "That's nice," and went back to ironing Sutton's jersey. It wasn't intentional cruelty. It was just the natural dynamic. Sutton was the center, and the rest of us revolved around him. After high school, Sutton earned a football scholarship to a state school. During his sophomore year, he injured his knee, dropped out, and moved back home. That's where things began to shift. Instead of regrouping and planning his next step, he stalled. He lived with our parents and took on short-term jobs, landscaping, bartending, even trying insurance sales for about 11 days. But nothing lasted, and no one in my family seemed concerned. The explanation was always that Sutton was figuring things out or going through a tough time. Meanwhile, he was 23, living in his childhood bedroom, playing video games, while my parents covered his expenses. At the same time, I went to community college, transferred to UT, and graduated with a civil engineering degree. It wasn't exciting, but I worked hard. I got a job at a firm in Nashville, started at the bottom, and spent 8 years working my way up. By the time I was 30, I was a project manager, handling commercial projects worth millions. I bought a house and met my wife, Jolene, at a friend's barbecue. She's an ER nurse, sharp, quick-witted, and highly perceptive. We got married 2 years ago, and life was stable and fulfilling. But there's a pattern that often develops when one sibling is successful in a family that favors another. You become the financial fallback. Not officially, no one openly says it, but it becomes expected. It starts small. My mom needed help with a dental bill, my dad's truck required repairs, Sutton needed help with rent when he claimed he was finally moving out. I agreed because they were my family and I cared about them. Over roughly 4 years, I estimate I gave them around $45,000. I didn't track the total at first. Most people don't keep records with family. Jolene did, though. Not out of suspicion, but because she's used to documenting everything in her profession. When she showed me the total, I thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. What bothered me wasn't just the amount, it was the attitude that came with it. Each time I helped, there was this underlying expectation, as if I was obligated to do more. It felt like my success wasn't mine, but something to be shared on demand. Sutton especially reinforced that idea. He had a way of making it seem like what I earned belonged to everyone. Whenever I mentioned something about my life, a new car, a trip with Jolene, his response was always the same: "Must be nice."
Some of us can't afford to leave the state. Promotion must be nice. Must be nice to have a job that actually pays. I ignored comments like that for years. Jolene kept telling me I was letting people walk over me. I kept saying this was just how families operate. She would raise an eyebrow and reply, "That's not how my family works." I would change the subject because I knew she had a point. The situation reached a breaking point about 18 months ago. Sutton had started flipping cars, buying old vehicles, fixing them, and reselling them for profit. On paper, it sounded reasonable. He had always been good with his hands. The issue was that his approach involved buying cars he couldn't afford to repair, storing them on property he didn't own, and then asking me for money when things went wrong. Within about 10 months, he went through 3 different attempts. After the third failed, he called and asked me for $15,000 to invest in another round of cars. I said no. For the first time in my adult life, I refused him. His reaction was immediate. He went quiet for about 10 seconds, which for him was unusually long. Then he said, "So that's how it is? I'm not worth 15 grand to you?" I explained that it wasn't about his worth, it was about the pattern. I had already given him tens of thousands of dollars, and none of it had led to any stability. I told him I cared about him, but I couldn't continue funding something that repeatedly failed. He ended the call. I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. Then I received a call from my mom that marked the beginning of the most unusual situation I've dealt with. She used a careful tone and said, "Adam, we need to talk. Sutton is in a bit of a situation and needs help with legal fees." I asked what had happened, whether he had gotten into trouble, a DUI, or hurt someone. She paused, then said, "He's suing you. He says you owe him money from a business deal. He has a lawyer, but he needs a retainer, and Sutton can't afford it. We were hoping you could help cover it." I stayed on the phone, waiting for clarification. I even laughed, not out of humor, but because the situation didn't seem real. My brother was suing me, and my family expected me to help fund it. I told my mom I needed to go and ended the call. 3 days later, my brother's lawyer contacted me directly. That's when I understood this was not just talk, it was an actual legal matter. The person on the call was calm, professional, and direct. The amount he mentioned immediately caught my attention. His name was Grady Tate. He introduced himself, explained that he represented my brother in a civil case, and then stated the figure, $200,000. My brother was suing me for $200,000. I briefly pulled the phone away, then asked him to repeat it. He did. He explained it was for damages related to what he described as a verbal partnership agreement tied to a car flipping business. According to him, I had financially supported the business and then withdrawn, which he claimed caused financial loss and emotional distress. He was asking for $200,000, representing projected earnings and additional damages. From my perspective, the claim had no basis. There was no partnership, no agreement, and no shared business arrangement. I had given my brother money the same way you lend a friend $20 when they forget their wallet at lunch, except I had done it hundreds of times, and that lunch added up to about $45,000. But Sutton had found a lawyer willing to take the case, and in the legal system, that alone is enough to create serious disruption in someone's life. I called my parents the next day, hoping they might have reconsidered. My dad answered. I asked if he knew what Sutton was doing. He said he did. I asked if he thought it made sense. There was a pause. Then he said, "Well, Adam, your brother believes you made him a promise and didn't keep it. He's hurt." I responded, "He's suing me for $200,000. I'm the one dealing with the consequences." My dad sighed, as if I was overreacting. He said, "You know how Sutton is. When he gets something in his head, he follows through. But this could be resolved if you just sit down with him and work it out." Then he added something that stayed with me. He said I had always had it easier than Sutton. I went to college, secured a stable job, and built a good life. According to him, Sutton never had those same opportunities, so the least I could do was support him when he was struggling. That perspective frustrated me. Everything I had came from years of effort, but my family treated it like it was simply luck. I ended the call.
As the legal situation progressed, I hired an attorney, Cordelia Voss. She explained that Sutton's case was weak, but even a weak claim requires time and money to defend. At the same time, my family continued to pressure me to give Sutton more money. No one questioned his actions. Jolene supported me throughout. She organized every record of money I had given over the years. The documentation clearly showed the payments were gifts, not investments. Cordelia said it was some of the strongest evidence she had reviewed. Then I learned something more concerning. My mom had taken out a home equity loan on their house to help Sutton pay his lawyer. When I confronted them, my mom became emotional and said Sutton deserved an opportunity to present his case. My dad remained silent. At that point, it was clear they had fully taken his side. That night, I made a decision. I would no longer act as the family's financial safety net. Over the following months, I focused on my career and my life with Jolene. My work progressed, I received a promotion, and we built new relationships. For the first time, my life was not shaped by family expectations. Meanwhile, Sutton's case began to collapse. His lawyer recognized the lack of evidence. With help from a forensic accountant, we demonstrated that Sutton had misused much of the money I gave him, and his financial losses were unrelated to me. Cordelia filed a countersuit to recover my legal expenses. During Sutton's deposition, the facts became clear. Even his legal team began looking for an exit. Eventually, Sutton withdrew the lawsuit. He agreed to repay approximately $32,000 of my legal costs over 4 years. Not long after, his girlfriend, who had encouraged him to file the case, left. A few months later, Sutton sent me a handwritten letter apologizing. He admitted jealousy influenced his decisions and said he regretted his actions. I acknowledged his honesty, but made it clear that rebuilding trust would take time. My relationship with my parents remains distant. We speak occasionally, but things have changed permanently. As for me, life is stable. Jolene and I purchased a larger home, my career is stronger, and I've built a community that isn't based on obligation. One thing is clear to me now. I am not anyone's financial fallback, and I won't allow myself to be treated that way again.